Peter Valentine, I think. So maybe you could state your name and your interest.
Certainly. It's Peter Valentine, CEO of Geelong Taxi Network, and my interest is in the inquiry as the CEO of a taxi network who are also licence holders and also operate in the largest urban zone in the state.
Yep, and we have your submission. So I'd like you to speak generally, please.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the invitation to attend the taxi industry inquiry hearing and to deliver this presentation in support of our previous submissions. As you are aware, Geelong Taxi Network responded to both the initial request for information and spent considerable time reading, understanding, meeting and discussing the issues contained in the draft report and with various stakeholders before presenting a response to the draft report. There are a number of key areas of the reform which we believe would be detrimental to taxi cab services in Geelong and surrounding zones. I don't intend to detail those today. I think they're adequately covered in the submission, but I would like to cover off on some additional points that maybe we haven't covered and raise other issues.
Sure. Yeah, it's quite a big submission, which is welcome.
Thank you. Particularly the concerns that we do have in general in regard to operation of taxi cabs, the potential introduction of open entry of PBOs, the non-mandatory affiliation of taxis and PBOs, and the handling of current licences and assignments, which has a potential to be damaging to the livelihood and savings of those who have assisted to deliver a high level of service and to build good Geelong reputation of the signees and licence holders. Our recommendations are for licence assignment capping combined with blind matching to provide a foundation for an excellent taxi cab service. If taxi cabs were owned and operated, as was in the past, without the government's introduction to assign licences back in around the 1990s, then maybe the current outcome of today may be different. Geelong Taxi Network has expressed its disappointment in the inquiry for not taking the time to visit the network. Geelong Taxi Network is the largest urban network and is also the largest network outside of the Melbourne metropolitan zone. The network was formed by joining a private company of 40 odd years and a cooperative of licence holders built up over 80 odd years. The network brought together many years of experience and successful delivery of taxi cab services, mixed with an excellent customer service developed from raw passion, from dedication, from sacrifice and from hard work. Geelong Taxi Network believe that we can improve and we always strive to be better. We strive to be innovative and to demonstrate a high level of customer service. And we also strive to be a respectable partner within the City of Greater Geelong. However, because we start from a strong base, it is always difficult to display large variations of improvement, particularly with regard to any statistical analysis review. Geelong taxis have a record of innovation over previous years. Geelong led the way in the introduction of radio taxis following World War II. Geelong Taxis was the first depot to have computer dispatch in Victoria, taking computer dispatch being developed and trialled through the Expertex system in Geelong. Geelong Radio Cabs was one of the first partners in the Taxi 131008 National Number Company. Geelong Radio Cabs was one of the first companies to introduce FPOS and payments into taxi cabs along with the providers. Geelong Taxi Network was the first and is still the only company to operate a totally independent wheelchair accessible taxi cab dispatch centre. Geelong Radio Cabs introduced the concept of specialised WAT driver training, took it to the VTD and it is now mandatory. Geelong was also the first company to introduce tow truck allocation centre to eliminate the brawling that happened between tow truck drivers at the scene of an accident, and still operate that allocation centre today. Geelong Taxi Network was one of the first companies to work on the introduction of contracted services, which we refer to in the summer inquiry recommendations, and we accept and welcome. And we introduced that predominantly with the 2010 World UCI Road Racing Cycling Championships and with Deakin Student University Transport. Geelong was one of the first companies to introduce a Safe City Taxi rank in conjunction with the City of Greater Geelong and in the 90s. And I mention those because most of those are along with other areas at the same time, but at the forefront. And now, and as of the weekend, the Victoria Police are introducing what they want to see as a ticket to ride system being introduced on the weekend. One of the issues that I wanted to raise today was something that hasn't been met head on, and that's the issue of taxi passenger behaviour. By saying that, I don't mean there hasn't been any consultation with passengers. There has been many stories and many bad experiences in taxi, and most of those also appear to be in perception and a response to poorly framed questions posed by the media quite often, and we see it locally. We're now reading about rude and impolite behaviour in many areas. In particular, on the weekend, there are recent reports in the weekend press confirming this high level of impoliteness. This information supports Geelong Taxi Network's experience with regard to passengers' behaviour, which has become an area of concern which we believe must be tackled. We're hearing daily reports now of recreational violence in other areas, and particularly in other cities in Australia. We're finding that drivers are becoming the recipients of a lot of this recreational violence. And in the main, this unacceptable behaviour seems to be stemming from the incorrect use of alcohol and drugs and landing in the lap of the taxi driver to deal with a person who is less coherent and less respectable than is acceptable to our society. So hence the reason I raise that, because it is an issue that hasn't been addressed, I don't believe, effectively as yet. Geelong Taxi Network have engaged with local stakeholders, including the Victorian Taxi Directorate, Victoria Police, the City of Greater Geelong and the Committee of Geelong, along with licence holders, taxi operators and drivers, to ensure that the future of the industry in Geelong and surrounding regions continues to deliver excellent service and strives for improvement, particularly working together to ensure that these goals can be achieved. In the Ticket to Ride project, Victoria Police will use a very simple ticket type docket system to be issued at a Safe City taxi rank with the identification of a passenger to ensure that if any trouble occurs, the driver and or the passenger has the capacity to be identified, the camera downloaded and the issue to be dealt with police to ensure an outcome. This system supports the safety of drivers and passengers by encouraging all taxis to make sure that they do pick up passengers, particularly in the CBD and only at in the CBD from the Safe City taxi rank on busy nights and not in normal times. It is extremely interesting that a third party, in conjunction with the network, has now found its way forward to try and assist to improve taxi cab services. Not only is it interesting, it becomes quite exciting. And it also demonstrates the recognition of the lack of respect from the passenger. The abuse and disrespect of taxi cab drivers is way beyond that and is now starting to filter through to the disabled community. Tragically, we are now experiencing what is called reverse discrimination. This is where people with a disability, who in many cases are being transported as a member of the MPTP program, where the government is paying half their fare, in these cases the passengers are being discriminatory towards particular drivers due to their culture, their religion, their colour of skin, and despite the delivery of services being made in a timely and courteous manner. Furthermore, we find that this goes beyond passengers' trips by encouraging those drivers to show discrimination against fellow drivers by providing favourable service options to the person with a disability with more favourable delivery of service and ignoring many passengers who have been ready to travel earlier or have blocked the booking from a more accessible, wheelchair accessible taxi, which could attend the job quicker and release the first watt thus providing the service more quickly. This may not seem to be a problem, but in the area where we have services being delivered to a person with a disability during peak and non-peak times, the efficiency gained in dispatching the closest car to the job to ensure that all passengers are picked up as quickly as possible and not by one person selfishly putting themselves at an advantage. A disabled person we're talking there. Geelong Taxi Network has operated under a PBBS contract for Watt services and dispatch of approximately 1,500 passengers per week in 24 Watt vehicles. By comparison, in the City of Adelaide, through a central booking office, we understand, dispatch approximately the same number of bookings but with 70 vehicles. Therefore, we would consider that the dispatch of Watt's vehicles in Geelong is at the height of efficiency. The PBS was developed with the VTD 3 years ago, and it has highlighted the extreme importance of a continuing relationship of the regulator to monitor regular developments and exchange new ideas. Here we're talking about a regular coming together of the regulator and the industry to work on problems as they arise. In recent times, the PBBS contract has come across some unexplainable deficiencies. And these deficiencies have come about because there's been a lack of continuing consultation where the government thought they were measuring one particular parameter and in actual fact they are measuring a total different parameter of a non-practical nature. And accordingly the data that may come out of that PBS contract is therefore not correct. The point that is being made here is that there is a huge difference between a lot of the recommendations that we see that may have economic rationale or may have a theoretical slant, but in the industry's eyes and at the coal front, with the delivery of services, theoretical concepts can sometimes be totally impractical. We urge the taxi inquiry, particularly the new TSC, to ensure that they constantly engage with industry on a practical note and revert back to a taxi industry advisory group as a TAG or similar to ensure that the outcomes that come out continuously are practical, can show improvement to the taxi cab service and also be fair to all stakeholders. Unfortunately, public perception can be a bad thing, and a typical example of public perception is that an MP recently was in Geelong in the CBD late on a Saturday evening at a particular function. The MP saw the Safe City taxi rank from a distance and thought he would not be able to get a taxi cab. So here we have a public perception, no different to a lot of public perceptions. What the MP didn't realise until he spoke to us during a recent interview was, and what he didn't appreciate, was that the Safe City taxi rank in Geelong handles around 1,400 people per night with a waiting time of around 10 to 12 minutes maximum from top to bottom of line. The MP thought that he would therefore try to hail a taxi cab not from the Safe City taxi rank. The public perception and the MP's perception was that it would take a long time to get a cab from the Safe City rank. The reality was that it wouldn't have taken long at all and that he and the driver would have been much safer using the Safe City taxi rank. On a further innovative note, Geelong Taxi Network are at the point of introduction of a Nightlink Maxi service in the City of Greater Geelong to replace the failing Night Rider bus service which was paid for by ratepayers' money. So in summary, we need practical solutions that are sustainable and that support and uphold the good name and reputation of Geelong taxis, and not solutions that will fall in a heap or lower the standards, such as what we term gypsy cabs and non-mandatory affiliation, which we believe that will lead to. That is, if we have any drivers left to operate these, because if the drivers aren't adequately numerated with regular fare increases and the fare box isn't an equal 50-50 split, they will not be able to keep their own individual businesses running and competitive. And drivers will not be safe and they will not be out on the road. At the point of entry of today's commission, I was impressed with the way that the Commission has set up this hearing, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss these matters. I know I haven't in my address here touched on my responses, but I thought it was important to make a couple of points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a lot in here as far as detailed consideration. Did you have?
Just pick up a couple of points. I mean, the issue that you raised in relation to taxi passenger behaviour is clearly an important one. What would you do about this issue?
There's a number of steps that we need to take, and clearly, first of all, what we've done, step one, is try to strengthen the stakeholder engagement. Consequently, that's obviously now been clearly defined and demonstrated with the assistance of police. Both Geelong and I also admit also Ballarat, and particularly instrumental in setting up an agreement with police relative to attending to issues so that we didn't take too much of their time. That's one issue that occurs in the smaller part of the time of the week and with a particular group of people who often seek to be disrespectful to people who are actually taking them home in a situation which they can't attend to themselves because they're not clearly available to drive. One of the other areas that I referred to was with this area of disability, and we find here that whilst they've got an excellent service, and I don't think there's any question of that, we seem to have this discriminatory nature about how people might like to select particular vehicles to deliver. Now, when we are running at the high efficiency rates that we are, we're not in a position to be able to run vehicles all over town and deliver that particular level of service. In addition to that, I think what has to happen is there needs to be a lot more education. I think it was also referred to in maybe not in a direct but an indirect way in the draft report, that the public need to have a further education in terms of taxi cab operation and a respect. I use the MP example purely to highlight exactly the fact that that perception could have been clearly overcome if that gentleman knew how taxi cabs operated 5 or 7 days earlier, then the perception may have been totally different. So all of a sudden the perception was, I need to get a taxi cab. We see in the press where we get blamed for all sorts of issues relative to taxi cabs. A lady was attacked not so long ago in Geelong, and in the first report it said, I couldn't get a cab so I walked home. 3 days later, the report was, she hadn't tried to get a cab, but she didn't think she'd walk to the safe ring. So, I mean, we're very sorry for those incidents occurring, but they're not our responsibility. But what we're saying is perception, unfortunately, needs to be corrected and education needs to be there. The other steps that we'd take is we'd like to see further elements of driver safety, and yes, there are some improvements that can be made with vehicles, and I think we've attested to that.
With the taking the passenger ID, I think that's an element of what's happening there now.
Clearly, what the police have picked up on an idea they have seen elsewhere. I think that they've actually seen it in New South Wales, where the security officer purely writes a identification number, no other details whatsoever, on a ticket at the Safe City taxi rank, and that is given to the driver.
So I think there was one report which said something about a driver's licence number. Or
driver's licence number could be a form of ID, but if it's whatever ID would be used to enter a nightclub.
And we've heard that those sort of ideas had run into some obstacles with the Privacy Commissioner.
No, the early ideas that I understood that ran into the problem with the Privacy Commissioner is where we had at one point in time asked if an ID scanner could be used on a Safe City taxi rank the same as it's used in a nightclub. My recollection of that meeting with the Privacy Commissioner, the police and the City of Greater Geelong was that because it was in a public place, a licence couldn't be scanned. This isn't doing that, and it's not taking full records, doesn't take names, addresses, date of birth, it purely takes a record to refer to if there is an issue.
Right. And in terms of the proposals of the draft, what impact do you see them, if they were implemented on your Geelong area? I mean, my understanding is, in a sense, there's been a bit of a shortage of cabs there, and you yourself have, as a network, have been trying to get additional cabs and have been running into blockages with the regulator and so on. But
I'm not sure that we've had any problems with additional taxis. What we had a problem with is that we had applied for 4 extra MPT licences, 2 for the City of Greater Geelong, 1 for the Bellarine Peninsula and 1 for Torquay. I'm not aware of any applications for taxi cabs licences well before my time, and I joined the company in the year 2000. We were offered some licences at the time Avalon Airport was open. At that time, the VTD asked, did we need them? We said no, and we think we've adequately covered that without an issue as well, particularly when there's 4 services a day coming out of there at the present.
okay. I guess we should note that the inquiry staff team did visit en masse your network very early in the inquiry.
Well, the staff did attend to say hello, but the actual inquiry discussion was held at the 4 Point Sheraton, if I recall. And what we really love to do is have you down there and run you through the way we do things. Exactly the way we want to put the VTD in a watt, so that they understand how the PBBS could run and should run. At the moment, I think there's a bit of a quandary as to them understanding how it actually does run, when in actual fact its development was quite unique.
Just sorry raising the watt issue, but it does raise this issue because our understanding was, having seen the data and so on, that the watt booking performance is actually not as strong, if you like, later in the evenings when, in fact, as we understand it, it transfers to Silvertop in Melbourne from the Geelong network. Is that right?
That does happen. When you say that, I'm not sure that the booking performance is any worse later in the evening. I'm not sure that that's the case. I think you'll find that the number of bookings are considerably dropped off. If we are averaging around 1,100 odd bookings with people holding an MPTP card, and an additional 400 watt bookings for non-MPTP members, who would be people moving from hospital or transferring from hospitals or hospital transfers, etc. and the like. I'm not sure, when you average that out over 365 days, I think we have about 10 bookings per watt per day. I'd love to see that benchmark in Melbourne. In fact, I'd love to be part of the development of it.
Thanks.
No further questions?
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.